miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Nomadic populations and those living in remote and isolated areas in the southern provinces of the country started voting today as part of the September 7th presidential election. Foreign Minister Ahmed Hattaf has received a telephone call from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. Protest in solidarity with Palestine has resumed at Columbia University in New York City on the first day of the fall semester. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. Nomadic populations and those living in remote and isolated areas in the southern provinces of the country started voting today as part of the September 7th presidential elections at mobile polling stations involving 116 and 64 registered voters and in 144 polling stations in 51 municipalities spread over 16 provinces. According to the Independent National Authority of Elections, ANI, the 134 mobile polling stations are spread as follows: 4 in Adrar, 4 in Lghawat, 4 in Bashar, 29 in Taman Rasit, 6 in Wargala, 9 in Ilizi, 12 in Tindouf, 21 in El-Wed, 1 in Mghayir, 9 in Nema, 7 in Timimoun, 6 in Bourbaja Mukhtar, 6 in Beni Abbas, 4 in Saint Sarah, 3 in El Gizdam, and 9 in Jannat. In this respect, the ANI delegations in the provinces concerned said that all the human and material resources have been brought together to ensure the smooth running of the ballot. Voters from the national community living abroad are voting to choose a president in good logistical and organizational conditions to ensure the smooth running of the operation. Tilman Salmani has the details.
From the start of the opening at 8 a.m., the polling stations recorded a significant influx of Algerian voters established in several countries, particularly in Europe and other parts of the world, who had come to exercise their electoral duty from the 2nd to the 7th of this month. The Algerian diplomatic and consular authorities have provided the members of the diaspora with all the human and material resources to ensure the success of the elections, in which 3 candidates are running. The candidates are candidate of the Front of Socialist Forces, FFS, Mr. Oshish Youssef, an independent candidate, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and the candidate of the Movement of the Society for Peace, MSP, Hassani Sharif Abdelali. In Egypt, Algerians living there are voting in the cities of Cairo and Alexandria. The chargé d'affaires at the Algerian embassy in Cairo, Mr. Amin Said, had this to say.
This morning, the voting operation for the September 7th presidential election started in Cairo and Alexandria. It was marked by large participation by the Algerian community living in Egypt. The Cairo Center also allows the national community in Sudan to cast their ballots. All human and material means are available to make this important event a success. Our national community is aware about the responsibility and it will massively participate.
In the south of France, the coordinator of the National Independent Authority for the elections in the region, Jamal Badra, stressed the interest granted by the national community to the election, pointed out that the electoral campaign, which was launched on the 15th of August, took place in good conditions. A total of 62 polling stations were opened for the members of the national community living in the various towns in the region. The Council General of Algeria in Marseille, Imad Slatnia, said that the opening of other polling stations, particularly in Marseille's neighborhoods, had greatly facilitated the voting process and lightened the burden of travel for the members of the national community living in the south of France. Voting for the presidential election on September 7th also was underway in good conditions in the Alicante and Valencia polling stations in Spain. Now in Italy, the polling stations at the Algerian embassy in Rome and the consulate in Milan and Naples were crowded from the very first hours of voting, with the remarkable participation of various segments of the community, particularly young people and students studying at Italian universities. According to the Algerian Consul General in Milan, Adel Talbi, the operation was going in good conditions at the 12 polling stations across Italy.
The voting operation for the national community in northern Italy started on the 2nd of September. It is taking place in good conditions. The Independent National Authority for the Elections, ANI, has provided all the necessary human and material means to ensure the success of the election. The number of voters registered at the Algerian consulate in Milan is 3,790 partitioned in 5 polling stations, including 3 mobile ones. This was aimed at making the ballot stations available and near all the Algerian community to exercise their right in the best possible conditions. We call on all the national community in northern Italy to head to the polls and exercise their right in voting and participating in the country's political life.
In Germany, where 15,151 voters residing in this country are voting in polling stations in Berlin, Frankfurt, Bonn, Stuttgart, Munich and Hanover. For the first time, the German authorities have agreed to open polling stations outside the headquarters of Algerian diplomatic representation in order to make it easier for voters to carry out their duty and to avoid having to travel long distances. For its part, the Algerian Consulate General in London has assured that all conditions have been met for the vote taking place at the offices of the Consular Centre in London, Manchester and Birmingham, Glasgow, Cardiff and Belfast. In Russia, voting began at polling stations number 1, which opened at the Algerian Embassy in Moscow, while a second polling station will open from Thursday in St. Petersburg until the 7th of September. Outside Europe, the members of the national community living in Tunisia, Lebanon, Cyprus and Jordan have begun voting at the various polling stations. According to figures provided by ANI, the members of the national community abroad estimated at 865,490 voters, 45% of whom are women compared to 55% were men and 15.43% were under the age of 40.
The Independent National Authority of Elections, ANI, has issued a press release calling for the strict compliance with the period of election silence from the end of the election campaign until polling day, that is from Wednesday to Saturday, the 7th of September. The ANI also drew attention to Article 81 of the Ordinance 2101 of 10 March 2021, which states that are forbidden the publication and dissemination of polls on electoral voting intentions 72 hours before the date of the poll on national territory, that is from Wednesday 4th of September, and 5 days before polling day for the national community settled abroad. And now Radio Algeria International will be organising a forum entitled The Diaspora Votes tomorrow from 11 a.m. This is a live audiovisual monitoring of the diaspora elections in the 5 continents, broadcast live on Radio Algeria International Channel 1, regional radios and the central platform and other online platforms. The 2-hour forum will be supervised by the Director General of the Algerian Radio, Mohamed Baghali, will include a live broadcast of the electoral process for our diaspora with Radio Algeria International special envoys and correspondents in various capitals around the world and live streaming from the polling stations. Analysts will also take part in the program. And now the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received a telephone call from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brotherly Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. During this telephone conversation, the 2 ministers reviewed developments in the Palestinian question in light of the continuation of the genocidal war being waged by the Zionist occupation in the Gaza Strip and its extension to the West Bank at the hands of the occupation authorities and Zionist settlers as part of the vast operation of cleansing, occupation and expansion. The 2 ministers also discussed the prospect of strengthening Arab-Muslim action in the face of these growing challenges and for mobilizing the international community in defense of legality in favor of the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state as a just, lasting and definitive solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict. The first phase of the integrated Algerian Qatari milk powder production project has been launched in the southern province of Darar. The first phase of the project includes prospecting for exploratory wells prior to the preparation of a study of the nature of the groundwater. The General Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Ben Said, said the project will allow the production of milk powder over an area of 117,000 hectares.
This is the integrated project for milk powder production in the province of Adrar on an area of 117,000 hectares in partnership with the Qatari company Bledna and the National Investment Fund. It is worth recalling that this big project, whose value exceeds $3.5 billion, will allow the production of 50% of the citizens' needs of milk powder, supply the local market with red meat, and create 5,000 direct jobs, in addition to its production to the production of cereals and feed.
The Qatari ambassador to Algiers, for his part, said this project is considered as the biggest projects of milk production in the world.
The Bledna project comes in line with the priority of the Algerian government to ensure food security and self-sufficiency as an important strategic project that exceeds the local level to reach the continental and world levels in terms of milk powder. It is considered as the biggest project of milk production in the world, and the government's commitment is being implemented by speeding up all measures and agreements related to the project.
That was the Qatari ambassador to Algiers. And now, moving to the Palestinian file, a number of citizens were killed and injured at dawn as a result of the Zionist bombardment of several areas on the 334th day of the genocide against the defenseless Palestinian population in the besieged Gaza Strip. Asya Becker has the details in this report.
In Gaza City, a citizen was killed and others were injured after the occupation targeted a house in Al-Daraj neighborhood, which led to a fire breaking out in it. 4 people were also injured when the occupation bombed a Barak's house and a family in a Sahaba area in Gaza City, while the occupation blew up residential buildings in a Zaytun neighborhood east of Gaza. Occupation military vehicles opened fire on citizens' homes in the vicinity of Street 8 in Tel El Hawa and the Zaytun neighborhoods in Gaza City amidst gunfire from drones and artillery shelling. The occupation artillery fired its shells towards the northern areas of a Nusayrat camp in the central Gaza Strip and the eastern areas west of the cities of Khan Yunis and Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. Medical sources confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7 has risen to 40,819 reported fatalities, with an additional 94,291 individuals sustaining injuries. The majority of the victims are women and children.
Jordan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ayman Safadi, has called for immediate international action to counter the measures taken by the Zionist occupying forces against the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. El-Safadi discussed with UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini the agency's fundamental role in serving Palestinian refugees. El-Safadi and Lazzarini stressed the importance of the international community to provide the political and material support that the agency needs to provide its basic services to refugees. El-Safadi condemned all measures taken by the Zionist occupation forces against UNRWA, calling them a violation of international law which requires immediate international action. Protests in solidarity with Palestine have resumed at Columbia University in New York City on the first day of the fall semester. Demonstrators are demanding that the university sever ties with Israel because of the conflict in the Gaza Strip and for Tel Aviv to halt its attacks on the Palestinian enclaves. More details in this report by Said Bourazi.
Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine wrote on X that the university is involved in genocide. The group said they refuse to live in a world where the mass murder of Palestinians is normal, acceptable, and profitable. Columbia University is complicit in genocide. Their investments in weapons manufacturers and defense contractors, companies such as Lockheed Martin, are fueling the genocide. In a subsequent post, the group vowed further demonstrations, labeling the recent protests as just the beginning. As we begin our new semester, students in Gaza have no universities to return to. Instead of listening to the student body, Columbia University is doubling down. We will not stop and we will not rest until Columbia divests from apartheid and genocide. This is just the beginning, they added. Pro-Palestine student protests erupted on U.S. campuses on April 17th when police arrested students at Columbia University during demonstrations. The onslaught has resulted in more than 40,000 Palestinian deaths, mostly women and children, and more than 94,000 injuries. An ongoing blockade of Gaza has led to severe shortages of food, clean water and medicine, leaving much of the region in ruins. The Zionist entity faces accusations of genocide at the International Court of Justice, which has ordered a halt to military operations in the southern city of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had sought refuge before the area was invaded on May 6th.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees UNRWA has called for the protection of Palestinian civilians in the face of the deadly Zionist aggressions in the north of the occupied West Bank. For more than 6 days, Jenin has been ravaged by violence and destruction, which is causing loss of life and injury, including among civilians, as well as serious damage to infrastructure. UNRWA Commissioner General Philip Lazzarini said in a message published on this platform that residents have limited access to food, water and medicines. In his message, the UN official called for the protection of civilians and to allow them access to humanitarian aid. The current Zionist assault in the West Bank comes against a backdrop of rising tensions in the occupied territory as the Zionist entity continues its brutal war against the Gaza Strip, claiming the lives of more than 14,800 martyrs, mainly women and children, since October 7th last year. At least 683 people have been killed since then, and more than 5,700 wounded by the Zionist fire in the West Bank, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. The Palestinian Prisoners Club said that 98 journalists have been arrested by the Zionist entity since it began its genocidal aggression against the Gaza Strip on October 7th. In a statement issued on Monday, the club said that since October 7th, 98 journalists have been arrested, 52 of whom are still being held. More in this report by Said Bouhazi.
According to prisoners' institutions and lawyers representing detainees in Zionist prisons, these journalists are facing charges that are based on vague and unclear grounds open to interpretation and manipulation. For these institutions and lawyers, these practices have become a tool used by the occupation authorities to try to repress Palestinians, particularly journalists, and silence their voices. In another development, 4 Palestinian journalists were injured Tuesday when the Zionist army fired directly at them in Kfar Dan, in the town of Jenin in the north of the occupied West Bank, said the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. In a statement, the society said, "Our teams in Jenin have provided first aid to 2 injured journalists, one of whom was hit by live ammunition and the other by shrapnel, and transferred them to the Jenin hospital." In another press release, the association said it had treated 2 other journalists who were injured in the same place. Journalist Jarrah Khalaf, one of the injured, said that he was accompanying a group of journalists to the besieged house in the town of Kfar Dan and that the Zionist occupation army targeted them.
That's it for today's news bulletin. I invite you to listen to a special program by Asia Bakar. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
A story in an artwork.